Namaste and hello. My name is Ram Jagesa. I am a retired journalist here in Toronto, Canada, with a lifelong interest in Hindu and Indian affairs. And today I am talking to Dr. Naveen Chandra here, also living here in Toronto, Canada, who is a retired geology professor, also with a lifelong interest in Hindu and Indian affairs. And our topic today is enemies of Hinduism, and in particular, one person who prides himself on being an enemy of Hinduism, Professor Kancha Illaiah, right, who is a professor in a university in India, who has for the past few years been consistently attacking Hinduism, right, on all fronts that is possible. Dr. Chandra here has written a book on 40 lies and ignorance that Kancha Ilaiah has put out on Hinduism, and today we will be discussing some of them. So, can you tell us a little bit about who this man Kancha Ilaiah is and why he is an enemy of Hinduism?
Kancha Ilaiah was born in Telangana, a Telugu-speaking state in India. He was born in a caste called Golas, that is shepherds. Therefore, he has put the name shepherd at the end of his name. Then, under the influence of Mr. Ambedkar, he claims he became a Buddhist. He also claims he did his PhD thesis on Buddha. He was at Usmania University, and then afterwards he kept on changing his universities. And he claims he has 5 heroes in his life. One of them is Jesus Christ, second is Muhammad, third is Karl Marx, fourth is Mr. Ambedkar, and fifth is Jyotirao Phule. He has admiration for Christianity because he thinks Christianity is a religion of peace. He admires Muslim religion for the same reason. And he admires Marx because Marx has given a theory on how to uplift the farmers and the workers. And his admiration for Ambedkar is quite obvious. Ambedkar was also a champion of so-called Dalits.
So let's get to
And then Jyotirao Phule was also one of them. Yes.
Jyotirao is a Hindu?
Yeah, he's a Hindu. He was a Hindu. Yeah.
Oh, he was a Hindu.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get straight to it. You have in your book 40 points in which you say that Kancha Ilaiah shows ignorance and actually lies. So let's get to it. The first one, the first point that we're going to take up is Kancha Ilaiah believes Hinduism will be destroyed and Islam, Christianity, and Marxism will take over after a massive conversion. Is he actually saying that?
He actually said that. Not only he, but other professors of the Jawaharlal Nehru University and other universities where Marxist professors are teaching, they also say and think the same way. In their universities, in their classes, they propagate this theory that in about 30 years' time, the people of India have to choose between the 3, which are Islam, Christianity, or socialism.
Well, let me interrupt you there. Does he present any evidence to show that in 30 years' time, or in maybe even 100 years' time, that Hinduism will be destroyed?
there are no evidences provided, there are no proofs provided in any of the arguments that Ilaiah presents. That is one of the great weaknesses of his arguments. If he really had any proof, he would have presented, but he doesn't provide any proof. You can look at how Hinduism was influenced by Islam for 800 years and Christianity for 200 years. And the results of conversions are very low. You can still see that 80% of the Indian population are still Hindu.
Let's take one at a time. Islam, they had 800 years of control over most of India. How much conversion did they do of the Hindus?
Well, right now, the percentage population, according to the census, of Muslims is around 14%.
But in their time, they converted 10%, right? During the time of Islam's, rule over most of India, they didn't manage to convert more than 10% in 800 years. So, what's the prospect of them converting the rest of the Hindus in 30 years?
Well, they are very slim, aren't they?
They're more like none.
Probably they are none.
What about Christianity? Christians ruled India for 200 years.
Now, you know that Christianity was propagated and was used by the British government. We all know that British government prided in itself, saying that they had an empire on which sun never set. And they ruled. Britannica rules Wales. That was their motto. And they used their government machinery to convert Hindus to Christianity. And right now the percentage of Christians in India is less than 3%. And half of that was really converted after 1947 and not before.
So when the British were in charge, controlling everything, they converted 1%.
1%
in 200 years.
Yes.
And what about our friends, the Marxists? How much Marxists do we have in India?
Well, the population of India, as you know, is 1.3 billion.
1.3 million.
Billion. And 1.3 billion, if there are a million Marxists, I think that is really stretching the fact. See, Marxists are very violent people, and just like Muslims and Christians. Let me just digress a little bit and then tell you about the violence of these three groups. The Christians, it is estimated, have waged wars. You can actually check in Wikipedia. Their killings close to 400 million people. Worldwide, Christians kill close to 400 million people. I'll give you just one simple example.
What about in India? Didn't the Christians use violence against?
British government killed 35 million people in India. And let's just give you an example worldwide. Spaniards killed 24 million Incas, and then 8 million Aztecs, and then 4 million Yukons. That is, in South America, their toll was close to 30 million, or so only by one nation. And now just compare that, just take other countries that have, other European countries that have colonized. You have Portuguese, you have Italy, you have got Germany, you have got Holland, Belgium, and England, of course. So all these countries, they combined, they committed so many genocidal practices in all these colonies that it is...
Let's come back to India. Is it fair to say that the Christians killed more people than they converted?
They killed more people than they converted.
Muslims, did they kill more people than they converted?
Of course, they killed more people than they converted.
So how do you rate it? Well, I understand the Naxalites are killing a lot of people too. They're killing more people than they convert to Naxalism or Marxism, whatever you want to call it.
That's correct. If you just look at the real figures of people killed by Naxalites, the Marxists, they are much more than what number of people killed in Kashmir every year, number of people killed in the wars every year. So this is really diverted because the media is controlled by the leftists, by the Marxists, so they don't really tell you the truth. And we all know that Marxists, they kill close to 140 million people. Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Che Guevara and Castro, these people were mass murderers.
So,
but they are eulogized by Ilaiah. Ilaiah likes all violent religions like Christianity, Islam, and then the violent theory of Marxism. But he says that Hindus are violent. He doesn't provide any proof for that.
okay, we come there. So how would you rate his belief that Hinduism will be destroyed and Islam, Christianity and Marxism will take over a massive conversion? Wouldn't that be pure rubbish?
It is pure rubbish and it is just wishful thinking. They want that to happen because Hinduism is an open system. It is a peaceful system. It has allowed all religions, refugees of all religions to come to India. There were Muslim refugees, there were Christian refugees, there were Jewish refugees, there were Parsi refugees, there were other refugees who came and then they made India home and they prospered. So anybody who wants to prosper, they have to prosper through hard work. So if Kancha Ilaiah wants to prosper his community, what he has to tell them is, work hard and then produce something and so that they will be respected.
And you move upwards.
And then they move up. Like he knows very well that in Telugu literature, we have a great poet of scheduled caste, Dalit. His name is Gabilan Joshua. Gabilan Joshua was such a great Telugu poet that Brahmins gave him the highest honor of Jnanapitha for him. So to say that Brahmins do not recognize the lower caste people is complete rubbish. It is a fabricated lie by Ilaiah and company.
Let's get on to point number 2, in which he says, there's no equality in Hinduism, there is no freedom in Hinduism, and there is no democracy in Hinduism. What is your response to that?
Well, I have to quote Bhagavad Gita on this.
This would be a lie.
This will be, yes. See, Ilaiah and friends say that if you study Bhagavad Gita very carefully, you will find that there is no equality. But that is not true. Ilaiah has not studied Gita. He doesn't know Sanskrit. He cannot quote one shloka from Bhagavad Gita, but then he keeps on talking about Gita as though he knows it. So I am just going to teach you, Mr. Ilaiah. There are these 3 shlokas I am going to read, and then you try to understand what it means. I will explain to you what it means. Number 1, it is taken from Gita chapter 5 verse 18. It says, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shuni Chaiva Shapake Echa Pandita Samadarshinaha. That means a pandit or a scholar is one who treats a Brahmin with a high education, a cow, an elephant, a Dalit, and also a person who eats dog's meat. So Gita says clearly, equality is important. Now he is equating a well-educated Brahmin with a person who eats dog meat. So you think that is not equality? Then tell me what is equality?
Freedom and democracy.
Freedom and democracy, right? Now, number 2, Samam Sarveshu Bhutetu Tishtantam Parameshwaram Vinapachya Vinashyantam Yah Pashyati Sapashyati. It says that person who sees God in everything, animate, inanimate, is a pandit. And he is the one who sees, he is the one who is a seer. That means everything is equal. A chair, a table, a camera, all these inanimate objects are also contain Parameshwaram, that is Brahman. So to say that there is no equality in Hinduism is just a complete fabrication and a lie. And I will tell you one more. Atma upamyena sarvatra samam pashyati yo Arjuna sukham va yadiva dukkham sayogi paramo mataha. It seems the person who finds Atma everywhere, and he will find Atma everywhere, he or she will find Atma everywhere, even if it causes him sorrow or if it causes him happiness, it does not matter. So equality is built in Gita. Out of 700 slokas, almost 200 slokas talk about equality, and you just dismiss Gita just like that because you have not read it, and you understand it, you read it and then talk about Gita. Without reading it, don't talk about it.
So let's come to the opposite now. He says Christianity, Islam and Marxism are equal, free and democratic, but Hinduism has no equality, no freedom and no democracy.
Okay, by the very concept, let us just look at the three systems. You got Christianity, you have got Islam, and you have got Marxism. You got a God in Christianity, you got a God's Son, you got one book, only one book. And then you got Allah, and you got a messenger of the Allah, and then you got one book, Quran. And you got Karl Marx, you got Lenin or Stalin, or in different countries you have got different, Stalin and Lenin are in Russia, but then you got Mao in China, and then the others in Cuba.
All the same theme.
All the same thing. They also have only one book, Das Kapital. Now, these three systems are so dogmatic that they will not accept anybody who is outside their system. Either you have to convert to these systems or you have to die. So this is democracy in these three systems. And Hinduism, which is open, Hinduism says there are many ways to God, whereas Christianity says only Christianity leads you to God, and Islam says only Islam leads to God, and Marxism, of course, we know how dogmatic Marxism is. They will kill you if you don't belong to them. And you are comparing them to Hinduism, which is open architecture and which accepts all kinds of people, which respects all faiths and which gives refuge to all people, and all kinds of people flourished in India, in Hindu society. Are you saying that, or did you take leave of your senses? What is the matter with you, Ilaiah? You should really be talking truth, not a lie.
So so Christianity isn't Christianity in most of its existence had slavery and was undemocratic. Is Islam, didn't Islam have slavery and is undemocratic to this day? And both of them, as you have mentioned, kill hundreds of millions of people. And Marxism, how many people did the Marxists kill in Russia, in China, and North Korea, and so on?
Well, we have an estimate. You can just look into the Wikipedia. They give an estimate of 140 million people killed by Marxists. And then again, I'm going to repeat it again, Ilaiah, so that you will remember this. 400 million people and counting were killed by Christians. 300 million people and counting were killed by Muslims. This is the history. You just look at your Wikipedia, what it says. So I'm not making up these numbers. And now you look at Wikipedia, what it says about Hinduism. You claim that Hindus kill Buddhists. Now what your friend Romila Thapar says, there is no archaeological evidence that Hindus killed Buddhists. And now what Mr. Ambedkar says in the same Wikipedia section, Ambedkar says that the Buddhism almost became extinct because of Islamic rule and not because of Hindus. Do you understand that, Ilaiah? Yeah. Islamic rule of 800 years was the main cause for the diminution of the numbers of Buddhists, Jains and others. So you better learn history before you talk about history.
So apparently he doesn't, because he says Hinduism is a religion of violence. I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, you have to show me. You have to show me a proof. Where did Hindus kill? You talk about killing of one person here, one person there. That is not really a genocide. Your religions, Christianity, Islam, and then your Marxism, they killed in millions. I just mentioned to you how many people Spanish killed, and how many people Portuguese killed, and how many people Anglo-Saxon Protestant killed. Have you not seen the genocide in North America and in South America and in Australia? The Anglo-Saxon Protestants eliminated tribes, completely eliminated tribes. There are no linguistic things left. And that's what you want in India. You want only English language in India. That is you want to kill Telugu? Is that what you want to do?
Yeah, so he says, it's hard to believe that he's actually saying this. Hinduism has destroyed all positive elements that normally exist in a human being.
That is nonsense.
That's a lie.
That's a lie. If you look at Vedas, if you look at Upanishads, if you look at Ramayana and Mahabharata, which you choose to interpret badly without even reading them, and Gita, which you have not read in your life, because the way you talk about Gita, it's very clear that you have not read anything of Gita. So, what are you trying to prove here? Are you trying to foment violence in India? Are you trying to foment killing of Brahmins and Hindus?
Apparently, yes. Here's what these are his words, taken from Wikipedia. He says, yes, I hate Hinduism. Shout that we hate Hinduism, we hate Brahmanism. And he says, the hated must, so he's actually, the hated must hate. The hated must hate. He says, I hate Hinduism, and he's encouraging the Dalits and whoever else in India to hate Hinduism, and he said, you are the people who are being hated, so now you in turn must hate the Brahmins, and I presume, do whatever that you say that the Hindus are be doing. He says, Hinduism is a religion of violence. You must hate them, and you must take steps to, what he says, capture the Hindu temples by expelling the Brahmins. Is this man mad or is he stupid?
Okay, Mr. Illaiah, I really hate to use the word professor because you don't deserve to be called professor. But anyway, you are a professor. You are earning lakhs of rupees per month, and that is in Hindu India. How is it possible? If Hindus are really so violent people, they are really hating Dalits, how come you became successful in India, ruled by Hindus? Especially you became successful after 1947, right? That is, you became successful after you got a PhD at Osmania University. And who were your professors? Were they not Hindus? Were they Christians, or were they Muslims, or were they Marxists? Who were they? How did you get your PhD degree from Osmania University?
Wait a minute.
You see, I was in Osmania University. I did my MSc there, so I know what Osmania University is like. So don't try to lie again about Osmania University.
Well, he is a professor of political science. What is his expertise?
He was head of the department. He was head of the department of political science.
But it's political science. He's talking about religion here. What is his expertise on religion?
That is the most unfortunate thing in India. What is really happening in India is the mediocrity is rising. Everybody talks about science, saying that they are scientists without any degree. Everybody talks about history, even though they have no experience in anthropology or in archaeology or in history writing. They have not read any yet, but they want to write books on history.
He's an amateur religionist.
Amateur religion. Do you know what is really in Vedas? Have you really read any Vedas?
No.
Do you know, for example, there is a sukta called Nasadiya Sukta in Rigvedam. It says, actually it is the origin of humanism. Do you know that? Humanism originated in Rigveda. And Rigveda was the first book that was ever written or ever vocally spoke of in the world. And they propagated, or they certainly originated, humanism. Now, humanism, as you know, enhances the position of man or human being over that of something that we don't know about. So how do you explain that then? And now I'm going to tell you one more thing. In Gita, in 2nd chapter, there is this verse that says, Nasate vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. Now it says, the thing that did not exist before will not come into existence in future. And the thing that existed before will not go out of existence. That is called conservation of matter in physics today. So Gita has a slogan as a verse that explains the conservation of matter, conservation of mass. That is, something that existed before will not be destroyed, and something that did not exist before will not come into existence. Don't you see examples of science in Gita? And there are a bunch of other slokas I can recite to you.
We're coming to that,
yes.
Naveenji. Here is his favorite whipping horse, caste system.
Yes.
Now, we've only done 7 points already. You have 40 in the book. His allegation is that castes were created by the Brahmins to suppress and oppress low caste people.
Right. Now, if you read Bhagavad Purana, you will know that there were 4 varnas that were created, and you will also know, because you wrote it somewhere, that the Brahmins came from the face, and the Kshatriyas came from arms, and the Vaishyas came from thighs, and the Shudras came from feet. And so you interpret this as saying that Shudras are the lowest quality. But that is not true, is it, Mr. Ilaiah? Because feet are not necessarily the lowest of the human body.
Feet are not inferior to any other part of the body.
Feet are not inferior to any other part. If you read Taittiriya Upanishad, in Taittiriya Upanishad, it says the following, and
wouldn't it be fair to say that the Varnas and the Jatis are simply a division of labor, which in many other countries you have, in England and Europe, you had the guild system, where if your father was a carpenter, you would likely be a carpenter, and you took your occupation. If you didn't have any school like we have now to train you in other trades, you took the trade of your father, right? So that, his assertion that the castes were created to suppress and oppress low caste people seems to me to be rubbish, because that comparison between the body and the 4 varnas, right? Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. This is an analogy. This is for the purposes of comparison. I mean, nobody's actually saying that Shudras came physically out of the feet of Brahman. Right? It's just a comparison. So.
Yes, but there is one more thing, Ramji. I wanted to cite this shloka from Taittiriya Upanishad, and I'm sure you don't know anything about Taittiriya Upanishad. Okay, let me read it for you. Hari Om Sham No Mitraha Sham Varunaha Sham No Bhavatvaryama Sham No Indro Bruhaspatihi Sham No Vishnu Rurukramaha. Now what does it say? It says Mitrudu Prana. Mitra is for Prana and Aprana, and then he is the deity of day, and Varuna is the deity of night, and Aryama is the deity of ice, and then Indra is the deity of force, and Bruhaspati is deity of brain, and Vishnu is the deity of feet. Do you understand this? He is saying Vishnu, the greatest
The
God,
preserver.
he is the preserver, the God who has 10 avatars. He is the deity of feet, whereas Brihaspati is the deity of brain. So, who is important here, Ilaiah? Is it Vishnu or is it Brihaspati? Tell me. With your limited intellect, you can tell who is really important. Obviously, Vishnu is important, right? And so, Shudras are important. So, that shlokas combined with what you are saying, it shows Shudras are the most important caste in Hindu religion.
They are the biggest.
They are the biggest, and not only that, when Shudras had a chance to move up, they moved up and became kings. They established dynasties. You know, Nandas were Shudras, Mauryas were Shudras, Kakatiyas were Shudras, Vijayanagara kings were Shudras, and all the Chalukyas, Pandyas, Cheras, and Pallavas, they are all Shudras. You see, it is attractive to become king of a country or a state than to read Vedas, isn't it? Because reading Vedas you won't get any money. But becoming a king of a country, you will get all the benefits, all the perks of the wealth. That is why the Shudras did not choose Brahman caste, because there is no money in it. Whereas there is money in being a king, therefore they choose Kshatriya caste, and Shudras became kings all over India, not just in Magadha, but all over India. In south, mostly from 10th century onwards, it was all Shudras who were kings. You know that very well, don't you? But then you don't want to admit the truth. You see, you exaggerate against Hinduism, but you don't say anything that is in favor of it, because you are partial and you have really no equanimity treating Hinduism.
Okay, Naveen, now let's go from what could be considered as serious points to what is. Here's what he says. He says Krishna was black, but the Brahmins made him white, right? Because Brahmins believe that white is superior to black. He also says that Krishna did not play with white cows, but played with black buffaloes. Krishna played with black buffaloes, he didn't play with white cows. And Ilaiah implies that all cows are white. He doesn't know that black cows called Surabhis were considered superior to all other colored cows. I mean, where is this coming from?
Well, it is coming from his imagination. He read one thing here, he read one thing there, but he never really read anything in depth. He doesn't know anything about Gita. But then he enters the uncharted waters because he has to say something about Hinduism. He doesn't know anything about Gita. He has never read. If he has read, he would have seen the equality there. He would have seen the democracy there. He would have seen the open architecture of Hinduism. That is not found either in Christianity or in Islam or in Marxism. These are all dogmatic systems, these three.
But white cows, meaning that white color is better, I mean, that is past ridiculous, right? That is absurd. What about this one? He says there are nude statues in Hindu temples. This is in poor taste because the Brahmins were sex fiends.
Okay, Ilaiah, you have so little knowledge of Hinduism. You know that there is a Shastra called Kama Shastra that was written by Vatsyayana. Now, can you find that Kama Shastra in Christianity or in Islam or in Marxism? Can you find the open discussion of sex practices? Isn't it what Freud wanted? All these modern psychologists want open discussion. Don't you see how America changed after 1960s, after Hugh Hefner and others? They changed the whole society by being open on sex. So that is what Hindus practice. But then, unfortunately, the Muslims with their sexual hang-ups and the Christians with their sexual hang-ups, they ruled India for 1,000 years, and then they just demolished what was really a great culture like Hinduism.
But let me interrupt you there. I went to Hyderabad, where this Kancha Ilaiah is from. The wife and I went to several Hindu temples there, and we didn't see any. We didn't see any nude statues. And I understand in Korajo there are very, very, very few Hindu temples with nude images of people engaged in sexual acts. India has what, 10,000 temples, or maybe 20,000 temples. There are, perhaps less than half of 1% of temples in India with these nude statues. So
Exactly.
what is he talking about?
Exactly. If you go to Venkateswara temple in Tirupati, do you find nude statues? If you go to Rama's temple in Bhadradri, do you find nude temples? There are nude statues. If you go to Shiva's temple in Banaras, do you find nude statues?
You go to Kashi, how much?
Yeah, Kashi. Kashi you don't find. So you take a small example, a small sample, and then you generalize. That is what the Marxists do very well. If they take a small sample, oh, that must be truth. You see, I am going this way, and then suddenly find that a bus is being burnt by somebody. So I assume that in this city, all buses will be burnt. So is that a statistical sampling? Are you a professor, really a professor? You take a small sample and then generalize. You take a small sample of Ardhashastra and then you denigrate it. You take a small sample of Manusmriti and you denigrate it. And you have not even read Gita, but then you denigrate it. So you don't really need any statistical studies to say something bad about Hinduism. Isn't that true?
There are no nude statues in Hyderabad, where he comes from.
No, there are no nude statues.
You're a Hyderabad man yourself.
Yeah, of course, I'm from Hyderabad. I have been to various temples. I have not seen any nude statues. And then you talk about the statues with the weapons in their hands. So how do you explain? That is what he asks. Why do you need weapons? You need weapons because to protect yourself. It is self-defense. What did Krishna say in Gita? You see, when you need to protect dharma, you have to wage war. And that everybody does. Americans do it, British do it, but British do it in a very haphazard way, like, sometimes they don't even fight, they run away from the battles. Now, Spanish waged wars, Russian waged wars, Germans waged wars. Now look at the 20th century, who waged wars more than Christians? Anybody else? No. You got First World War, you got Second World War, you got Korean War, you got Vietnam War, you got 2 Gulf Wars, you have got never-ending Afghanistan War, and then in addition to that you have got series of coups everywhere in the world, orchestrated by the West.
Well, let's come back to the gods with weapons and fearful-looking gods. Do gods actually need weapons? Does a god need an axe or an arrow? Or who does God, an avatar or God, actually destroy with an axe? I mean, it can't be humans. Humans can't stand up to a god. So isn't most of the weapons that we see in the hands of the gods symbols? That Parsuram has an axe. It doesn't mean that Parsuram is going to kill people with an axe. He doesn't need, God wants to kill people, doesn't need an axe. But the axe is a symbol that you cut away. If you go with him, you use the axe, you cut away your problems. If you have the, Ganesh, he has a goad, right? This is what you use when you're on an elephant. You stick it behind the elephant's ears and tell him, move, go ahead. So isn't that a symbol that God encourages you to move ahead with your life, to tackle your problems and so on, so that there is really no point in a god having a weapon. The man is so stupid he doesn't understand symbolism, which is inherent in Hinduism.
That's correct. Not only that, you look at Bible. How much violence is there in Bible? Jehovah sends somebody to kill all children, all women, all old people, everybody in that particular village. How many times did God do that? Did Jehovah do that? Many, many times.
The Christian God apparently killed everybody in the world. He said that he told Noah, everybody outside there is bad, so I'm going to drown the entire world except your family and your people, so that it doesn't compare. Let's go back again to another big one. This man Ilaiah, he believes in Aryan invasion theory. Some strange people named Aryans came from outside, came into India, and they took advantage of the dark-skinned people who were in India, who were the Dravidians, right? And those Aryans wrote the Vedas, wrote all this highly developed scripture and language and so on. And he says that Ravan was a Dravidian and Rama was an Aryan. What do you make of this?
Well, Professor Illaiah, have you really read Ramayana? Don't you know that Hindus believe in Karya Karana Sambandham? That means whatever karma you have done, you are going to pay for that karma in the next life or in the next life. Don't you know that? Now, Sita was insulted by Ravana in one of her previous births. Therefore, she took an oath that in the next birth, she will be the cause of his death. If you have not read that, please read it. And now, secondly, Ravana himself was the son of Pulasya Brahma. He was a Brahmin. Ravana was a Brahmin. Do you know that? And now you talk about other Rakshasa. Just let me tell you one thing. The Vritrasura, who was a Rakshasa, was a Brahmin. Do you know that? Then Mahishasura, who was killed by Durga, was also a Brahmin. Do you know that? And then Narakasura was actually the son of Vishnu and Bhudevi. And therefore they were not Dalits. You want to say that all these Rakshasas were Dalits. Where is the proof for that? Is it in the books that you read, or you just make it up out of your imagination? All these Rakshasas, most of them were Brahmanas, and they were called Brahma Rakshasas, and they were very powerful. And so, to say that Hinduism persecuted Dalits is wrong. They persecuted adharma. Rama persecuted Ravana, who was a Brahmin, because he was adharmic. He was not a dharmic person.
So Ravana was not a Dravidian?
No, he was not a Dravidian.
There is no such thing as a Dravidian.
There is no such thing. I will tell you how this Dravid thing came about. First of all, let us look at Ramayana itself.
No, you were saying that the DNA evidence shows that there is no difference between people who are called Aryans and people who are called Dravidians, right? That the DNA is the same throughout India. So this idea of foreigners coming in and civilizing India and giving them Vedas and Rig Veda and all this thing is nonsense.
Yeah, well, that is really nonsense. The thing is, I was going to tell you how this word Arya, the Dravid really came about. You see, there is a word of Dravid in a 12th century book called Rajatarangini. It is written by Kalhana. Kalhana writes that Brahmins are of two types. They are Pancha Dravidas and Pancha Gaudas. So in Pancha Dravidas, he includes Brahmins from Gujarat, Maharashtra, Andhra, that is Telugu speaking people, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. Therefore, these Dravids extended not just in South India, as Mr. Ilaiah would have us believe, but they extended from South India to Maharashtra to Gujarat. So that is and all the Dravids were Brahmins. Adi Shankara, a Brahmin, called himself Dravida Shishavu. And then there is a sect in Telangana called in Vemulavada. They call themselves the Brahmin sect. They call themselves Dravids. So Dravids is not really Dravidians, Shudras. No.
This is
Brahmins.
an invention of the British.
It is the invention of British, it is the invention
Germans.
of Pule, it is the invention of all these people who are the heroes of Mr. Ilaiah.
It's another lie, right?
It's a damn lie.
All right, let's come to a fun one. He says, meat eating is superior to vegetarianism. Where is this coming from? What is this about?
Well, you see,
Is it he wants the Hindus to eat beef, right?
he wants Brahmins to eat beef. That is what. Probably there may be some Brahmins in Hyderabad who became Marxists who eat beef. That's fine with me. I have really nothing against it. But to say that vegetarianism inferior to non-vegetarianism is totally wrong.
And meat eating makes you stronger. Is what he's saying.
No, that is wrong. Elephants are very strong. Do you know that? Buffaloes, the bulls, giraffe, the moose, all these animals are very, very strong. They don't eat any meat.
They all well.
They are all vegetarians. And now you look at dinosaurs. Tyrannosaurus, which was the meat eater, existed at the same time as Brontosaurus, which was a vegetarian.
10 times bigger.
10 times bigger. And so how do you explain that, my friend? And now among the apes, they were vegetarians and they were non-vegetarians, and in the evolution cycle, they appeared at the same time. And same thing in human race also. There were vegetarians and non-vegetarians at the same time. There is nothing like, non-vegetarians came first and then vegetarianism came later. There is nothing like that. So you should read some biology, or you should read some paleontology, you should read some science before you really make any assertions like this.
But doesn't modern science tells you that vegetarians live longer than meat eaters,
exactly.
and vegetarians are healthier.
Now there is one more fact we have to really come into take into consideration. We have what is called an environment. In an environment, if carbon content goes up, if methane content goes up, we will lose our environment, and then this will be the end of the planet. We will become red planet like Mars. Probably you don't know it because you don't know any science. Now, what United Nations did few years ago was to release a report called Livestock Long Shadow. So what they did was they took into account of how many animals are required if each person on this planet, that is each of our 7 billion people on this planet, were to eat 150 grams of meat every day. You will need billions of goats, sheep, you need cattle, you need other animals that you want to eat. Now just imagine these billions of animals, how much methane they will introduce into the environment, and how much of that will be injurious to the environment. And you know that there is a carbon budget as per the Paris Agreement, and there are other agreements that the world scientists have come to, and they say that carbon is only so much, and then you should really have a carbon negative budget. And no country except Bhutan has carbon negative. Most of us are carbon positive. So you want to reduce carbon positive, you want to reduce methane. Now if in 30 years the population goes to 9 billion people, how many billion animals will you need? So when you need all these animals, billions of animals for you to eat, where is the budget for energy, for industry, and for transportation? So you won't be able to drive, your son will not be able to drive a car, or your grandchild will not be able to drive a car if you insist on eating meat. And now today, all the beef eaters are now coming to a practice right now. They are becoming vegetarians. And the Chatham House, an intellectual think tank in London, has issued papers saying that we should really be becoming vegetarians. And the reputed British journal Guardian also said that. So you look at those reports, they are saying it. So United Nations, various think tanks in the world, and then various journals are advocating a return to vegetarianism, and now you are saying that you want to eat beef.
Okay, Naveenji, we're running out of time, so I think we have time for two more points. One, he says the Manusmriti oppressed and suppressed people of lower caste, and he also says the same theme, the Gita fully supports the enslavement of Shudras. That's one point. And the last one is, well, I don't know how to make of this one. He says that Voltaire was killed by Brahmins or by people like the Brahmins, and Ilaiah compares himself with Voltaire, you know, one of the leading figures in the Enlightenment in Europe. Let's go with Manusmriti oppressed people of lower caste, and the Gita supports the enslavement of the Shudras.
Okay. Now, Manusmriti, I admit, Professor Illaiah has a lot of bad verses. We have to remove those verses. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But when Manusmriti was written, there were no Dalits. You know that? And now, when Manusmriti was written, there were only 4 Varnas, and therefore Manu could not have included Dalits in his book. Manusmriti was used for governance, for the rules of government in almost all Southeast Asia.
But wasn't it, when it was written, it was for a specific time?
That's correct.
And place.
Right. You see, Smriti, there are 2 kinds of books in Hindu Dharma. One is Shrutis, that they were heard, and they are Apaurushyas, and they are eternal. And the second is Smriti, written by human beings, like Bhagavad Gita is a Smriti, Manusmriti is a Smriti, and these Smritis change from time to time. That is why you have other Smritis like Yajnavalkya Smriti, you got Parashara Smriti. So for each age there was a different Smriti.
So for this age, we can ignore the pieces of the Manusmriti that are not relevant for today.
We can definitely do that. But then when Manu wrote, there were no Dalits, so these were introduced later on. And then, as you know, if you look at the history of lawmaking, you know that the British common law was based on Napoleonic law, Napoleonic code, and part of Napoleonic code borrowed from Manusmriti. And you know what Friedrich Nietzsche says? Close your Bible and open Manusmriti. This is what Friedrich Nietzsche says. So, are you a greater person than Friedrich Nietzsche or Voltaire or other Western philosophers who hold Manusmriti in high esteem?
Isn't the Indian civil code based on the Manusmriti?
Yes, it is. And that, of course, he wants to remove that civil code, right? Because that is the problem with Mr. Illaiah. If there is 1 or 2 shlokas bad, of course, in the case of Manusmriti, there are many more. They have to be removed, of course.
He wants to throw the whole Indian civil code?
The whole. Actually, he wants to destroy Ramayana, Mahabharata, Vedas, Upanishads, everything he wants to destroy. But then, you know, it is not really, it's neither here nor there. And then we come to Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, if you read in the 9th chapter, there it says, Shudras will go to heaven, will get mukti, jivan mukti, just like anybody else, just like Brahmins, just like Vaishyas, just like Kshatriyas. So just read chapter 9, there is a shloka. I'm not going to tell you which number because I want you to work a little bit, okay? Read Gita before you criticize it.
So he's also talking about the creation of a Dalit state. He says a Dalit state will be far more socialist than better socialist model than any others. He's actively talking about this balkanization of India, given the Dalits a state by themselves. How many Dalits are there in India?
There are about 200 million, 250 million.
So 200 million people should get a state for themselves. What about the other 900? There were 1,100 million Hindus. Isn't this madness?
It is really treason. To suggest division of India is treason. It was already tried,
yes.
And Pakistan did not work. Pakistan separated from Bangladesh, and now Pakistan and Bangladesh are really not doing very well. They are not even considered as states. They're failed states. And now he wants to create a socialist state. Now you got USSR. What happened to a socialist state USSR? Now what happened to socialist state Cuba? What happened to socialist state China? You think China is really a socialist country today?
But why doesn't the government of India arrest him for treason?
Well, that is a good question. That is a good question. He should be made to answer that question for advocating a separate Dalit country, as you are saying, looking at your notes.
You notice that
And we'll just get back to this question of
Voltaire. Let's finish off with Voltaire.
He says Voltaire was assassinated. Now, Professor Ilaiah, should I call you Professor?
That's a lie.
That's a lie. He was not assassinated, he died. And that is given there in Wikipedia, in his biography. He was not assassinated, Mr. Ilaiah. He died. And now what the Christians do, you admire Christians so much, right? You know what Christians did? They said he should not be buried in their cemetery. Therefore, he was buried elsewhere.
He was not Christian.
He was not a Christian. That's right, he was not a Christian. Therefore, they didn't allow him to be buried, but then only afterwards, after 50 years or so, when after Napoleon, they brought his body back and then buried in a Christian cemetery. So you don't know that, do you really? Do you really know Voltaire? Voltaire admired Hinduism. Voltaire spoke so highly of Vedas, so highly of Upanishads. Do you know that? Do you know that most of the physicists of quantum mechanics, like Niels Bohr, Oppenheimer, Heisenberg, and others, even Einstein,
yes,
they took ideas from Upanishads. Do you know that? Uncertainty principle has its origins in Vedas. Do you know that?
So what about him comparing himself with Voltaire?
When he compares himself with Voltaire, he says that he may die, the Brahmins will kill him like French Brahmins killed Voltaire. So Voltaire was not killed, and then Mr. Ilaiah, don't worry, nobody is going to touch you. Nobody wants to touch you and then get, well, should I say the word? But I don't want to say.
They are French Brahmins?
They are French Brahmins.
I think we better stop there.
Yes.
Thank you, folks. This may well be part one. His book has 40 lies and errors, right? From Kancha Ilaiah. We only managed to get through about 15 today. So look forward to part two. Thank you again.